Hey everybody, welcome to video 2 on philosophy of education. I'm Vincent Price, PhD of Price Stamp of Approval, here to give you some insight into actually constructing a philosophy of education, okay, or teaching philosophy, depending on where you are. If you're not familiar with what that is, and I'm talking to future educators, people who want to be teachers in the future, you might want to look at that previous video, because in the previous video I give you a rundown of what a philosophy of education is and does, and what types of things you need to consider as you're drafting that. Just as a quick snippet, what you're going to be doing as you draft a philosophy of education is basically draft a profile of who you are as an educator, what you believe, what you think, what you feel you need to do or you want to do in your classroom. Okay, so remember that there's a previous video to this, giving you a rundown. Um, but I want to make sure as we get into this that you go deeper than just staying at that what I believe level. Okay, in the previous video, I told you that you need to definitely go deeper to the why I believe it. And then there's another level. So you start here, what you believe, figure out why you believe it, and then how it's actually going to affect the students, how it's actually going to affect you as the educator, you as the teacher. Okay. So, for example, I believe this education is all a matter of building bridges. That's a Ralph Ellison quote. I love that quote. It's part of my philosophy of education, it's part of my whole philosophy of teaching. Okay. But why do I believe it? I, I believe it because I believe it's true. I know it's true. The way we learn, the way our brains work is that we can better hold on to one thing, one new thing, when it latches on to something that we already understand, that's already in our brains. So we have that building bridges idea, the old latching on to the new, and then the new being stable, and then that new thing becoming old, and then latching on to something else. Okay, so it's building bridges. And so how does that going to affect the students? Well, their brains work similar to mine. So I'm going to start with what they know, where they are, and then use that as a connection point to something new that I want them to know. Once they have enough practice with that new content, that it becomes normal and regular, and they're comfortable with it, then that stuff becomes old, and now I can move to another piece of newness to incorporate into the classroom. So it's a building process, okay? Gradual steps. So that's what I believe. I've talked about why I believe, and I've also talked about how it affects the students. So how do you get to this point, though? Well, when I was working on my PhD, I was teaching a class training future secondary educators, so future folks who are going to be teaching in junior high, middle school, and high school. And so, instead of asking them to draft me an actual essay format of a philosophy of education, I asked them to draft me simply a bulleted list of this I believe statements. The this I believe statements are a great way of brainstorming to see what you actually believe. And they can come, those statements just cover any and every area of education and of your content area. For example, this I believe, this is coming from me, that grammar and punctuation serve as tools for communication. So that's definitely connecting to my content area, English. This I believe, that teachers must expose the students to the problems in society and support their right to challenge those problems. So that's more of a general thing. My role as a teacher, exposure. Another one, that the teacher, among other roles, is a facilitator meant to guide students along their paths of discovery and connection. Notice that this touches on my role as a teacher and also the student's role. So they're going to be actively engaged in discovering things and making connections. And one more. Ah, this I believe, that literature sometimes perpetuates stereotypes and single stories of a people. So this goes right back to that content knowledge. So you should see that my this I believe statements, and I have plenty more, actually spread out. Okay. There's no point in just focusing on the content knowledge. You're more than your content. The content is just your vehicle through which you're going to be actually connecting to the students and teaching them and helping them reach to that next level. So don't just stop with the content, math, social studies, English, French, what have you. You gotta go a little bit wider, expand your horizons. As you do that, you want to think back to these things that I mentioned in the first video. Think about the roles. A few of my statements that I just read touch on who I am as a teacher, who I want the students to be, what role I want them to play. The goals. So what goals do you want to have for your classroom? What does success look like to you? What is motivation? What role does motivation have? And what types of things are you expecting from the students in the long run? And then moles, those types of things that if you don't take them into consideration, they will mess up your whole foundation of your classroom. So motivation, engagement, classroom management, so on. So think about these types of things. If you want me to go into more detail, go back to the first video. Okay, so think about these roles, goals, and moles as you draft your this I believe statements. Once you have your statements, your list, you can stop there if you're not required to actually submit that. If you're not required to submit a philosophy of education, you can stop there because it's going to be doing its job. As you go into the job interviews for being a teacher, they're going to ask you some questions directly directing toward that philosophy of education. So what do you think about technology in the classroom? What types of things do you want to incorporate into your classroom to keep students engaged? What's your take on classroom management? If you've done this I believe statement draft, then you should have an answer to that. So that's easy. For those of you who actually have to stitch together an essay format, then the difficulty comes in stitching together these actual statements. Okay, so here's one thing you can do. You have your list of statements. Then, second step, try to group those lists. Okay, figure out what's similar and group those together. Once you have them grouped, just think of a label for each group, a category name for each group. From that point on, for your essay, paragraph 1 or paragraph 2, depending on whether you have an intro, is going to talk about that first category. Paragraph 2, the second category. Paragraph 3, the next one. So you're chunking it. If you don't want to do that, you can chunk it this way. One paragraph talking about roles, one paragraph talking about goals, one paragraph talking about moles. Okay, so it's going to help to chunk things, not only to make things easier for you, but also to show that things are connecting. Your role as a student or your role as a teacher is going to affect the role of the students. It's going to affect the role of the parents and the administrators. So it helps to talk about those things together. Okay, so last time I'll say this, as you think about your teaching philosophy or your philosophy of education, focus on what you believe, why you believe it, and how it's going to affect the students, how it's going to affect you as a teacher in the classroom. If you have any questions for me, leave a comment, like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be updating with other videos dealing with teaching, dealing with writing, dealing with editing, formatting, what have you. Follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, Price Stamp of Approval, Vincent Price, PhD. Have a fantastic day.